Hello there, and welcome to Into the Neuroverse, the podcast where neurodivergent people talk about being neurodivergent. I'm your host, Lana, and my brain runs on about 15 different operating systems at once. You know when someone tells you to just focus and your brain immediately opens 12 new tabs, starts wondering if sharks can get hiccups, and remembers that embarrassing thing you said in year 7. We're going to be talking about that and probably 17 other different things before we eventually get back to finish that thought. So this is where ADHD, autism and all the other brilliant brain differences get to be loud and messy and honest. We're not here to fix anything or to pretend a colour-coded planner changed our lives. We're here to share stories, laugh at the absolute chaos, and maybe realise we're not the only ones who have thought about driving to Tesco and somehow ended up watching an entire TV series instead. Each episode we'll chat with other neurodivergent people about the genuinely bizarre and wonderful stuff our brains do. The good, the ridiculous, and the why did I just spend 3 hours researching medieval bread recipes at 2 a.m? Right, let's get into it before I forget what we're doing. Hello, lovely people. Welcome to our very first episode of Into the Neuroverse. And today you've just got me. No guest today, because I'm hoping that by the time you finish listening to this podcast, you will be sending in some questions or some thoughts. So, before we get started, I just want to give you a disclaimer. Today's topic is a serious one. So, although I promised you humour in the teaser, there's not going to be much humour in today's topic. However, if you listen to the bloopers of us trying to get this one produced and out, you'll probably find it's quite hilarious. Today's episode is called Are We Overdiagnosing Neurodivergence? Now, before anyone throws their phone, take a deep breath, because we're going to talk about this really carefully, and we're going to talk about it with a little bit of nuance, and we're going to talk about it without gatekeeping anyone's identity. Okay, so why are we even asking this question? Why is it even a thing? Let's start with why people are talking about this. People are talking about this because there are more and more adults and young people who are being diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And for some people, they will straight away go, hang on, we didn't have autistic people or people who are ADHD in our day, years and years ago. But actually, yes, we did. We just didn't see them, because we used to massively underdiagnose. So now that we have much higher levels of diagnosis, we have people who are now jumping on the bandwagon of, is this a trend? Is it TikTok diagnosing people? Are people watching one video on YouTube and realising actually they're autistic or they're ADHD? Is everyone neurodivergent now? That can sound quite alarming, and it can also minimise the difficulties that those of us who are autistic and ADHD do have to struggle with on a daily basis. Overdiagnosis means that people are diagnosed if they don't meet the criteria for diagnosis. Misdiagnosis means that people are diagnosed with the wrong thing, and in neurodivergence, it's misdiagnosis that's usually more common. Of course, we have to talk about the social media effect. We have to talk about TikTok. Social media, whatever you think about it, has raised awareness. It's given voices to people who can talk about their experiences, maybe when they've never been able to talk about them before, and it's helped people find community. And that's been one of the most important things, is to help people find their tribe. So let's go back to the original question and let's reframe that question. Instead of asking, are we overdiagnosing neurodivergence, I think a better question is, why does it feel like there are suddenly so many more neurodivergent people? Well, the answer to that is because when something suddenly becomes visible, it can feel like it's brand new, even when it's always been there. Left-handedness is another example. When schools stopped forcing children to write with their right hand, the number of left-handed people didn't suddenly explode. They were just finally allowed to exist and they were seen. And I think something very similar is happening with autism and ADHD. This sudden explosion of adult diagnoses isn't something that's happening because of a fad or a trend. It's happening because for all those years, people who presented later on in life were masking their differences. So let's talk about masking for a minute, because masking is one of the things that gets misunderstood the most. Masking is what happens when someone learns, usually really early on in life, that being themselves doesn't quite land well in the world that they're in. So they adjust their behaviour. They start watching themselves. They watch other people. They edit their reactions and they second guess what they say before they say it. And this isn't because they're trying to deceive anyone, it's because they're trying to belong, or stay safe, or avoid just being corrected all the time. And that's the one thing that I really want to be clear about. Masking isn't a personality trait. It isn't something that everyone does. I mean, some people might do it if they go out with their partner to their works event and really don't want to go because they don't like the people that their partner works with, or they'd just rather be in binge watching something on TV. And they end up going and they mask. That's not what autistic masking is. Autistic masking is a survival strategy. It's learned. And it's something that you do to try and make yourself feel more comfortable and just like everybody else. Because if you're not like everybody else, that's when you start to be called weird, odd, different, and we could go on. A lot of people who mask really well get told things like, oh, but you don't look autistic, or you don't look like you have ADHD. And people mean that as a compliment. Throughout my work, I've done lots of talks about autism, and often people will come up to me at the end and say, oh, you don't look autistic. And sometimes I think, well, yeah, because I left my autistic head at home today. I'm not sure how they expect me to look. Hopefully, if enough people have interest and listen to the podcast, then we will talk more about masking in a future episode. But for now, I'm going to circle back to the original question. I told you that there'd be about 17 tabs before we got to it, but let's go back to the beginning. So our original question was, is neurodivergence being overdiagnosed? So really the heart of it isn't about overdiagnosis or underdiagnosis. It isn't even about the label itself. It's about whether that diagnosis gives you permission to be fully you and your authentic self, without hiding, without feeling like you have to perform. That's where the real power lies. Not in fitting into a box, but in finding understanding and support, and it's whether we're finally diagnosing something that's always been there. And if that diagnosis helps someone live with more understanding, more self-compassion and more support, then surely that's a win. So as we close, I encourage you, whether you're questioning yourself, be open to self-knowledge, be kind to yourself in the process. So I'm going to leave it there for today. Not with a big dramatic conclusion, not with a neat answer, all wrapped up with a bow, because honestly, this isn't really a neat question. It's a debate that's going on at the moment. There's a rhetoric in the media about overdiagnosis, which makes me angry. And if you're listening and you're still thinking, yeah, I don't know where I stand with all of this, that's fine. You don't need to have it all sorted out in your head. Curiosity is allowed and it's welcome. Uncertainty is allowed and it's welcome. And changing your mind is absolutely allowed and welcome. And if this episode's brought things up for you, thoughts, questions, even disagreements, I'd really love to hear them. So send them in, because this podcast is meant to be a conversation, not a lecture. If you would like to be featured on the podcast, click on our bio and visit our website and fill out the guest form. Hope to see your forms rolling in. Thank you for spending your time with me and for sitting with a topic that's complicated. It's personal to me, it's personal to those of you that are listening, I guess. And it's uncomfortable. And it's okay to talk about uncomfortable things. Just take care of yourselves and be kind to each other. And I'll speak to you next time.